What's up, Average Dad fans? Welcome back to another video, and today we're talking iPads. This is the 5th generation of the iPad Air. I'm going to tell you all about the specs, hardware, software, but more importantly, is it worth buying? Spoiler alert, no. Let's find out why. Well, before I talk about why you shouldn't buy it, let's talk about the specs of the device. The iPad Air 5th generation has a 10.9-inch LCD panel, which looks fine. Yes, the bezels are quite thick, considering it's a 2022 tablet, but still, Apple, that's just what they do. One thing I would say is, having used the Samsung Galaxy Tab S8, while the bezels are thinner, they're still less practical than the iPad's thicker bezels. What I would say is the iPad Pro 11 or 12.9 inch have the perfect balance of bezel thickness. There you go, that's too many thicks in a sentence, but that's the end of that. Other things about the iPad Air, hardware wise, beautiful design. Aluminium frame, body, glass in the front, obviously. Ports wise, there's one port, it's a USB-C. Slightly different from the iPad Air 4 though, this is a 5GB USB 3.1 port, so it's not Thunderbolt 4, but it is much faster than the 4th generation iPad Air for transfer, read and write speeds, so that's a bonus. Other improvements are on the camera side of things. While we still have the same 12 megapixel sensor at the back, which it works, it's the same sensor in the iPad Pro's main camera, so it works perfectly if you use your tablet for that. What it does have now though is a front-facing landscape ultra-wide camera that does support the center stage functionality, which, yeah, works fine. I am not someone that takes, well, to be honest, I'm not someone that takes Zoom or Teams calls on my iPad, but if I was taking those calls, I would not be the person that gets up and walks around and needs a camera to follow me. Typically, if I'm taking a Zoom or Teams call, I'm at my desk and I'm sitting pretty still. But again, I get the feature if you're a chef or whatever and you're moving around. I get it. It works. It does work. Just like Samsung's auto framing, it does work. It's pretty cool. So again, other things about the tablet. There's a Touch ID sensor, which I love. I still can't get used to, and I've had an iPad Pro for years now, I can't get used to unlocking it with my face if I'm lying in bed. And again, if you're consuming content, then you've got it in landscape mode. And where's the Face ID? It's down here. I just want it straight ahead. One thing the iPad Pro doesn't do, and I'm sure it will do in future, but right now, iPad Air gets a win. That's a win for me. The Touch ID works seamlessly. I'm hoping the iPad Pro will bring this to the device soon. So again, yeah, no Face ID on the iPad Air, but Touch ID works really well. Now internally, we have moved on from the A14 chip to Apple's super lightning quick M1 chip. This is my first red flag as to whether the iPad Air is worth it. The M1 chip, for me, is way too much power or overkill for even the iPad Pro. So to bring it to the more mid-range, less pro variant of an iPad Air just seems like overkill. I understand there's probably just a surplus of M1 chips kicking around in Cupertino. I was trying to think where Apple are from, like Cupertino. But still, the A15 chip would have more than sufficed, in my opinion. And yes, you're probably saying, well, why wouldn't you take the M1? Like, that's silly. Well, for me, putting the A15 chip could have brought the price down even further. We'll get to all the pricing specs, but in the UK it's £569 for the base iPad Air Wi-Fi only. If it was an A15 chip, could it have been £519 perhaps? It makes a difference, especially when I come to talk about pricing later. Now, continue with the iPad itself. It's running on iPad OS 15. Yep, that's what they call it. And it's iOS. It works perfectly. You can put things into folders. You can add some widgets. That's basically all you can do to customize an Apple device, but you can do that. Everything's snappy. Everything works really well. Great. Now for the biggie, the display. I mentioned already, it's an LCD panel, so it's not mini LED or OLED like the Android tablets. If you don't have a iPad Pro right beside the iPad Air, you're not going to notice this as much, but I do. I have the iPad Pro 12.9 inch, and beside the iPad Air, and I'm not talking size here, I'm talking everything else. Picture clarity, colors, darks, pixel density, everything iPad Pro just looks better. And yes, it's more expensive, but we'll come to price. What the iPad Pro does have is 120 Hz refresh rate, dynamic, so from all the way from 10 Hz up to 120, which helps with battery life, and along with that M1 chip, I mean, the battery life is insane, the efficiency is great. But with the iPad Air, it's 60 Hz no matter what. That's a bit of a bummer. Again, the M1 chip allows you to play games up to 120 Hz. It allows you to 3D render, do lots of different things. You kind of want a Pro display to do all these things. So I've mentioned already, putting the M1 chip in iPad Air with only a 60 Hz screen, an LCD at that, if you're a Pro, you're just not going to be able to work with the screen as much as the P3 color gamut's there. It's just visually not as appealing. Connectivity wise, the iPad Air has caught up with the iPad Pro. It obviously has Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, but it now comes with 5G capabilities. Now, I have a 5G phone, which I'm sure you do too. Be honest, how often do you use 5G? Yeah, and that's on your phone. So the amount of times you use 5G in a tablet, oh, that's, yeah. Fair play if you do. If you're out and about and you're using your iPad Air to work on 5G network, that's great. You're that, yeah, you're living the life. But I just don't. So again, could they have cut costs and not made the iPad Air 5G and brought the price down another 20 or 30 pounds? Now you're looking at $499 for the base model iPad Air. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the whole reason why I can't recommend, won't recommend the iPad Air 5th generation. There's a lot of numbers here, so try and keep up. I'll leave them on the screen. The iPad Air base model Wi-Fi only comes with 64 gigabytes of memory. Again, if you're someone that feels they need an M1 chip, you're probably someone that uses more storage than 64 gigabytes. So I'm going to just assume that. The only other storage capacity is 256 gigabytes. That is now £719. So £719 for the 256 gigabyte iPad Air 5th generation. The iPad Pro 11 inch, so slightly bigger screen, smaller bezels, better rear camera, 120 Hz refresh rate, all that good stuff, I should mention though, both support the Apple Pencil 2nd generation. I never mentioned that before, but they do. But drawing and everything is far superior on the iPad Pro screen for that touch refresh rate and screen refresh rate and latency. Anyway, I digress. The iPad Pro 11-inch is £849 for 256 gigabytes of storage. So with the iPad Air being £719, the iPad Pro for the exact same storage capacity is £849. Do the math, it's £130 difference. £130. I don't know your financial situation, so don't take this as read, but the benefits you're getting for the extra £130 way outweigh the cost. They just do. There's another option. You could go for the iPad Air 4th generation, which Apple no longer sell on their website, but Amazon Renewed do, for round about £450, which is actually closer to where I think the base model iPad Air 5 should be, but anyway, I've explained that already. But for £450 you can get the iPad Air 4. Now, what won't you have with that? You'll have slower USB-C port at like 2 gigs per second. You won't have the center stage functionality. You'll have the same camera on the back. But everything else is pretty much the same. It's an A14 chip, which is more than enough for the iPad Air. You'll have 60 Hz refresh rate, iPad OS 15, and you'll continue to get updates on that until iPad OS 19, I would imagine. So yeah, see where I'm at here? Oh, I should also mention that was for the base model. If you want the iPad Air 4 256GB version, you can get that for £539 through Amazon Renewed, so £540. Again, a lot of numbers here, but iPad Air 4, ultimately the same tablet as the iPad Air 5, bar that chip, but you're never going to use it. £540. iPad Air 5, £720. iPad Pro 11-inch, £850. There's your 3 price brackets. You decide which one you land on. Look at further reviews. If you want to know specs and processing speed and stuff, MaxTech do all the best Geekbench and 3D rendering, gaming, all those metrics and benchmarking. I love that channel. Shout out to MaxTech. I'm not going to do that because they do that. What I will do is try and give you honest consumer advice and maybe save you money. For me, the iPad Air 5 is a confused device brought out because Apple had lots of spare parts kicking around. Now that's not uncommon for Apple, that's what they do. But to price that at £720 for the storage version that most people would need, yeah, I can't get on board with that, especially knowing that the iPad Air, the iPad Pro 11-inch is, yeah, not much more. And the iPad Air 4 is much cheaper. So, you now have the knowledge, do with it what you will. If you've watched to this point of the video, thank you very much. Make sure you've subscribed though, because 20% of my watchers are subscribed, which means 80% of you are leeching on to these free videos and not subscribing. Shame on you. Anyway, thanks very much. Take care.